me to reintroduce myself. Hi, my name is Tori, and for work I do my husband. I am great at turning billionaires into millionaires by just marrying them. I don't have an OnlyFans. I have one OnlyFans and an endless subscription to his wallet. I don't shake my ass. I shake my husband's assets. Dating a guy just because he has a supercar? Pfft, foo. Marry a guy because he has a supercar and boom, you own half of it. Call me a gold digger. At least I have gold.
So there you have quite a typical stereotype of Eastern European women. The gold digger, that contrasts quite considerably with the other main stereotype, in my opinion, a canard, which is that Eastern European women are the complete opposite of those radical Western feminists. They are traditional women. But what does that entail? Is it true? That's what I'm going to explain to you in this video. Поехали!
SAR Experience.
So let me deal with the gold digger slash scammer slash hooker stereotype first. Now this used to be the main stereotype about Eastern European women when I first started to come here. I actually came to this city, Odessa, Ukraine in 2009. I had actually been in St. Petersburg in Russia and in Lithuania, Latvia the year before, in the Baltics, also been in Poland. I know Poland is not Eastern Europe, it is the eastern part of Central Europe, but basically the same stereotype applied when I was coming from the West. I was in Western Europe, living in Western Europe at the time. Is that, oh, the women over there, kind of, where are you going? They're all gold diggers, they're scammers, or they're hookers. And let me deal with the gold digging part. First, what is a gold digger? A gold digger is a person who looks for a transactional relationship that's based on money or resources more than any sort of emotional attachment or interest or love or any of those kind of things. Normally that's stereotypically a woman because of female hypergamy, which is the trend of women to seek partners or mates who are on the same socioeconomic status level as them or higher. And in general, just women have less access to money by themselves on average across the world. So that's normally why we have a stereotype of women being the gold diggers. And I would say that here in Eastern Europe, there is less shame in being a gold digger than in the West. It's more socially acceptable or less looked down upon in general. And as a result, women are a little bit more open about it, saying, I want the man for money or whatever. I wouldn't actually say in reality that gold diggers are more prevalent here. Second thing, the scamming. Well, I have dubbed this city in the past has been Scam Central, Odessa, Malmö, because the amount of romance scams that were going on. This was a center for the matchmaking business, the marriage agency business, where stereotypically a guy, we'll say in his 50s, overweight, disheveled, not the highest value on the dating market back in somewhere in the Midwest in the United States, would come here and have a bevy of dramatically younger, better looking women from Ukraine, all lined up, all dying to meet him. But of course, in general, this was not the reality. There was a huge scam business around it, whether it was with the matchmakers, but also, these women who are the scammers, they are looking for their victims, right? So they would go to sign up to marriage agencies, deal with matchmakers in order to scam the guys, and have maybe an agreement with a restaurant around here, or they bring the guy and go shopping with him and lead him on. They could also do it via Tinder. There was actually a bar restaurant just up there that was notorious before this war, Russo-Ukrainian war, expanded in 2022. I see the restaurant is actually closed and has been closed for a while because there are no victims, or they would just hang out at a nightclub that would attract a lot of tourists. And the main reason for that is there's just so many thirsty, desperate men from the West coming here, trying their luck with local women, but not having any clue about how the social dynamics work here in Eastern Europe. They didn't have any good guidance, and basically they probably weren't used to being scammed back in their home country, and very open to it, unfortunately, when they see an attractive woman. This is a stereotype that's actually not just here in Odessa, but basically around most of the region. And you can take it a step further. I made a video on the Baigozhanki, which are a group of women, primarily from Russia, that teach other women how to extract resources from men. It's kind of almost hilarious, how, you know, the chutzpah that they have in trying to get guys to pay for all their stuff all the time. So you have these kind of scammers, and again, I think there's a combination of a few different factors, like the local culture being a little bit more about women being less emancipated, and guys paying for stuff kind of leaves it a little bit more open to this, and you have disingenuous women to try and take advantage of it. But the main reason is, especially with foreigners, the number of desperate simps, and these women will seek them out because that's their main objective. And then the third part of this kind of immoral, shall we say, stereotype of Eastern Europe women is the hooker stereotype. Now, I think because of socioeconomic factors and the fact that women here are in such demand worldwide for their beauty, definitely there are a lot of women, a significant number of women who do go abroad to prostitute themselves or here locally. I don't really ever come across it. I guess if you're not looking for it, you don't really see it so much. And definitely just in general, if you speak Russian or another local language here, like a Ukrainian in this country, or Romanian and Moldova, etc., then these kind of women in general, whether the gold diggers, scammers, or the hookers, they tend to avoid you anyways because they don't see you as a mark. You don't look like the low-hanging fruit for them. But yeah, you should be screening for all of these things. You will see, if a girl has a suspicious Instagram. Instagram is a great source of information because then you can see where she's been hanging out, what kind of profile she has. And a lot of the indicators are there. A popular place to go as a gold digger or as a hooker is the Middle East. So, for example, that could be Dubai. Not that it's automatic. If the girl is in Dubai, she may have other good reasons to be there, but is a potential red flag. That does happen quite a lot for those factors that I mentioned. But in summary, once you are able to screen through that small segment of Eastern European female society, part of that, the part that is engaged in either being a gold digger, a scammer, or a hooker or prostitute, then you hang out with the rest of the society, which is none of those things. So yeah, let's get into the more common stereotype I think that we find nowadays, which is the traditional woman here. So now the trad wife stereotype. This has become particularly prevalent in the last, I'd say, about 5 years here in Eastern Europe, and it's mainly because of the amount of marketing that's gone into it, driven by either scam, what we call PPL sites, which are paper letter sites, is online chat of some sort, where they try to be the ideal trad wife for a lot of guys in the West, and they just basically scam them, or it's actually the matchmaking, marriage agency, romantic tour business here that pumps a lot of money into describing Eastern European women. It used to be centered again here in Ukraine, but also to a certain extent to Russia, to Belarus, to Moldova in general. And then you have, I think, a little bit more coming in from the political side that, well, radical feminism has become, let's be frank about it, a scourge in the West. And then the contrast to that is to talk about traditional women. Say, over there in that place, they're untouched by radical feminism, because radical feminism is not a big thing here in Eastern Europe. So there are all these trad wives, they're all there looking like supermodels and pleasing their men non-stop and baking cookies and pumping out children and basically being this complete polar opposite to women in the West, or the radical feminist part of Western society. So this is obviously great marketing to guys that are frustrated with their options in the West, but the reality is most of these marriage agencies are basically pitching traditional single moms to you, which is an oxymoron, which is a really beautiful oxymoron to think about, right? So what is the reality here? Let me start with the part of it that is truer than the other part, and that is that here in Eastern Europe, women are less emancipated in general, and as a result, they are more willing to sacrifice their career, for example, or what they have in terms of work, in order to focus on child rearing and maybe more domestic parts of the work that needs to be done in a couple. Also, obesity for women under 40 more or less is very rare here in Eastern Europe. As I've also mentioned, radical feminism, not a thing here. So none of this body positivity and being, 50 kilos overweight and being proud of it, and yeah, hating on men like the radical feminists, that is definitely not something you're going to see in general. I have other videos about this, about the obesity thing, but under 40, more or less, there's no obesity. Actually, over 40, there is actually a good bit of overweightness here in Eastern Europe, but when they are still on the dating market in general, they are slim and trim. So that part definitely has a lot of truth to it. Think of it in terms of maybe what it would have been like in the West, maybe in the US back in maybe up until the 1970s, 80s with second wave feminism, as opposed to third and fourth wave feminism, which is radical feminism. That would be where the society is more or less. And also you should remember that Eastern Europe is quite big. You have the Caucasus, for example, which is a lot more conservative and really traditional. And then you have places like Ukraine, Poland, as I said, Central Europe, but eastern part of Central Europe, the Baltics, Belarus, Russia, which are a lot more liberal, I would say, and less traditional than you're going to find maybe also in parts of Central Asia. Kazakhstan, big cities like Almaty and Astana, where I've been, are less traditional than you're going to find out obviously in the countryside. And that's another thing. There's obviously, as you'd expect, a difference in terms of being more traditional. The older people are, and also more rural they are, as opposed to living in a big city, which tends to be more modern in mindset. Here is the bad news for all of you who have been roped in by the traditional Eastern European wife marketing. You want to know what the divorce rate is in Eastern Europe? It's higher than in the West. Because that's one of the big things that guys pushing, that, oh, the Western women are ruined, look at the divorce rate, look at the number of single moms. They don't even have an incentive in family law here to get divorced, and it's over 55%, right? Just basically the whole region. In terms of like what's normally marketed like Ukraine and Russia and Belarus. On top of that, number of children, fertility rate, lower than in the West. It's 1.3 as a generalization around here. Most of the West is somewhere between 1.5 and 2. That's not great. That's a problem in terms of the, regenerating the population, but 1.3 here. So they're not having large families either, and they're getting divorced, which means the typical single mom has one child, maximum two, and she's probably in her early 30s when she's divorced. I did mention there are other parts that are more conservative or more traditional, to be exact, traditional. That would be that, well, sexual promiscuity is low, and actually that women get married as a virgin, or they have a body count, to use the new expression, of one for life. And you'd find that in, say, the Caucasus, a lot more common. But, I looked online, because a lot of guys have asked me for info on this under their videos. I couldn't find stats for Ukraine, but I found them for Russia in the Moscow Times. And it's claimed that 40% of Russian girls lose their virginity before the age of 15. And the age of consent in Russia is 16. Right? So, wow, is that a traditional society? Well, probably not what most people would think. And my purpose in bringing this up is not to shame women or say that they're not traditional, they're all whores or something. It's just to point out that this traditional stereotype doesn't really hold water. So if you are thinking that you're gonna just rock up here in Eastern Europe and you're gonna go to a traditional society, that's a misnomer. Do I think it's less woke? Woke is not even a thing here, but it is not a traditional society. It's actually one of the reasons I like it a lot, because I don't want to live in a society like, I don't know, Afghanistan and the Taliban looks pretty traditional to me, not very attractive. You know what, in the past I've actually challenged some of my consulting clients who said they were looking for a traditional woman to come with me to Armenia, for free in fact. And you know how many took me up on it? 0. Why? Well, they're not as famed for their beauty, and they really do want to stay virgins until they get married in general. So that wasn't very attractive to these guys, but we did have something we could agree on, that is that in general, the women in Eastern Europe are on average a lot more beautiful than women in the West. So regardless of whether you think that they're traditional or that they're gold diggers, there's a reason why so many men in the West are interested in women from Eastern Europe, and especially in coming here, meeting someone. I guess in the past they were trying to bring the women back to the West, which for me just sounds like a terrible idea. If you're trying to escape the West, why bring a woman back, especially with family law in the West. And actually, anecdotally, I talked to a guy who used to have a Russian wife in Canada, and he was in a group of Canadians that had wives from Eastern Europe. This is like maybe 15 years ago, and I asked him, well, after a couple of years, how many of them are still together? He said, well, less than 20%, because when they got there and realized how family law works and they already had their residency, the guy kind of became superfluous to requirements. So what I recommend is, if you can do it, set up your lifestyle to come here to Eastern Europe so you don't have to deal with all that hassle. So regardless of where you lie in this debate, perhaps a little bit semantic at times about what the stereotypical Eastern European woman should be, the traditional trad wife or actually a just money-grabbing gold digger, I think we can all agree that Eastern European women in general are the most beautiful in the world. This is the region, in my opinion, having traveled to around 100 countries, where I have seen consistently the most beautiful, in my opinion, of course. And if you want to come and meet them, the 9s and 10s, the super beautiful, the Olympian level of beauty, what are you doing next weekend? Because it could be you with me living the Zara experience here in Eastern Europe. But we won't probably be here in Odessa, Ukraine, because the Russo-Ukrainian war is ongoing, and I am not currently bringing clients to Russia, Belarus, or Ukraine. But over the last 8 months, I have been living the Zara experience with my clients in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, Chisinau, just up the road in Moldova, Latvia, then in the capital Riga, and Warsaw in Poland. So down below is an application form to the Zara experience, along with some other additional information. But before you go and apply, please check out the playlist. I'll link number 1 and number 2 up here on cards, down below in the description as well. And the first one will give you an overview of many of the cities that we have gone and lived the Zara experience in, along with some previous client testimonials, give you a better idea what the Zara experience entails before you apply, before I have to review your application. And the second one is a playlist about how to date the 9s and 10s in Eastern Europe. So go check out all that great free content before you apply, and I'll review it, and then perhaps it'll mean me and you living it up large here in Eastern Europe. I do focus the in-person experience on the nightlife because, in my experience, over 10 years of being here in Eastern Europe, that is the place where you can, in the shortest space of time, meet the most beautiful women if you go to the right places. And you have me, the insider, as one of my former clients referred to me as, directing you in that way. So go check it out. Down below is the application form. And on that note, whether they're traditional or not, do pobacenia from amazing, incredible Eastern Europe, Odessa Mama, standing strong here in 2023. Do peremohi.
Zara Experience.